Okay, let's dive right in. We are just constantly bombarded with headlines, right? Things that feel totally random, kind of shocking, and just disconnected from each other. But what if they're not? What if there's a kind of hidden logic, some wiring that connects them all? Well, today, we're going to try and trace that wiring. So, we're not going to start with some big, grand theory. Nope. Instead, let's look at the symptoms. The strange and sudden glitches that keep popping up all over the world. These little moments that hint that the system isn't quite working the way we've been told it does. These are the cracks in the code.
Take Chile, back in 2019. A tiny increase in metro ticket prices becomes the spark for a national firestorm. But it was never really about the tickets, was it? As this quote says, it was the explosion of years and years of pent-up rage against deep, systemic inequality. A seemingly small event just rips open this massive societal fault line.
And then you get something like this from the corporate world. Shopify, a huge tech company, just completely flips the script on hiring. It's not about if a person is qualified for a job anymore. The new default is AI. A human only gets hired if a manager can literally prove that a machine can't do it. That's another glitch, a fundamental shift in how we even think about human value in the economy.
And in our own social fabric, we see this deep hypocrisy. This quote gets at how a notorious landlord in London accidentally exposed the polite, respectable face of a society that, just under the surface, had this ruthless desire to keep people out. It's that gap, the gap between what we say we believe and how the system actually works.
So think about it. A social uprising in South America, a corporate policy in North America, a cultural hypocrisy in Europe. They feel like totally separate stories, right? But they're not. They're all symptoms of the exact same underlying systems, connected by a hidden wiring that we almost never get to see.
So how do we find that hidden wiring? Where do you even start? Well, one of the most effective ways is to, you guessed it, follow the money. Let's trace how these huge global decisions create very specific and often devastating local outcomes. Okay, what's really fascinating about this slide is how it just maps out the whole chain reaction. It starts with this big, abstract idea. The World Bank funds a dam in Thailand to help its export economy. Sounds fine, right? But then, look at the fallout. Step 2, locals are displaced. Step 3, the river gets polluted, destroying their livelihoods from fishing. And Step 4, the whole ecosystem collapses, with 56 fish species going extinct. So yeah, the project hit its global goal, but the massive social and environmental cost was paid by people who never even got a say. And this just brilliantly illustrates the gap between why we're told a policy exists and who it actually helps. We're told tariffs on electric vehicles are to protect jobs, but the sources show the real winners are the profits of companies like Ford and GM. We're told corporate bribery is just about securing business, but it mainly enriches executives. You see the pattern here, right? Policies are sold with one story, but they serve a completely different interest. So if the system keeps spitting out these kinds of outcomes where, global profits always seem to win out over local well-being and the public good, it kind of forces us to ask a really important question. Who are the architects of this thing, and who benefits the most from keeping it just the way it is? The sources we're looking at consistently point to this one concept, an oligarchy. And we're not just talking about rich people. We're talking about a small, super-connected group that holds enormous power across corporate, financial, and political worlds on a global scale. And according to this analysis, it's not just about greed. It's a pathology, a mindset so completely detached from the consequences of its actions that it sees the rest of the world and all of us as just resources to be controlled and used up in this never-ending quest for more. They've basically built their own separate reality. Sure, they might have passports, but they operate in this transnational space, this world of private jets, yachts, and fancy hotels that exist completely above the laws, taxes, and social contracts that bind the rest of us to our communities and our countries. And the crucial point here is that this isn't some abstract conspiracy. It's brazenly transactional. Look at this example. A huge donation is made, and poof, a federal investigation just disappears. It's a direct, you can see it with your own eyes line connecting huge wealth to political power and ultimately to getting away with it. So this leads to maybe the most important question of all. If this whole system of connection and control is so pervasive, why don't more of us see it? What's getting in the way? Well, the sources argue it's because the blindfold is engineered just as carefully as the system itself.
A key tool here is controlling information. In this case, reporters found that Monsanto put pressure on a TV station to change a story. See, the company wanted everyone to believe there was no difference in milk from cows treated with its artificial hormone. But the journalists knew, and they had the science to prove, that the milk had much higher levels of a known cancer promoter. They were basically being asked to broadcast a lie.
And then there's this other tactic, an ancient one, but it's incredibly effective. Divide and rule. The playbook is pretty simple. Convince different social groups that their real enemy is each other. You create and reinforce artificial divisions, like race. You use polarizing movements to create as much conflict as possible. You frame any popular resistance as criminal. It all makes sure that we're too busy fighting each other to look up and see the real structures of power causing our problems in the first place.
And this number shows you just how effective that media blindfold can be. When the Associated Press released a story based on official U.S. military autopsy reports revealing that civilians in custody had been tortured to death and their deaths ruled homicides, 99.5% of U.S. newspapers and TV stations chose not to run it. Just gone, an almost total information blackout on a profoundly disturbing truth.
So if the system is this massive and the blindfold is this sophisticated, how in the world do we ever hope to see through it? I mean, is it even possible? Well, the sources we've been looking at suggest that there is a way, but it requires a whole new way of seeing the world. The answer isn't some new policy or a new piece of tech. It's a fundamental shift in our own thinking. It's about developing a different kind of awareness, one that can actually cut through all the manufactured noise and confusion.
You know, we hear the term critical thinking all the time, but the sources are getting at something much, much deeper. It's not just about logic puzzles or winning an argument. It's a disposition towards the world, an active, ongoing way of relating to information, to other people, and maybe most importantly, to our own assumptions.
And this new way of seeing is built on 3 pillars. First, there's reflexivity. That means turning inwards and asking, okay, who am I and how does my position in society shape what I see? Second, imagination and curiosity, the ability to genuinely try to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. And third, alterity, which is the capacity to decenter ourselves and to recognize the value of others, even and especially when they're different from us. And that is the tool for taking off the blindfold. It's what lets us shift from a kind of cold, detached rationality that just crunches data to a more holistic, more human reasonability, one that connects our analysis to empathy, to ethics, to our shared experience. It's really about thinking with our whole selves.
And this brings us to the final question, the one we want to leave you with. Once we remove that blindfold, once we start tracing those hidden wires and thinking with reflexivity and imagination, what then becomes possible? What changes when we stop seeing a bunch of random, chaotic events and we start seeing the single, interconnected story of our world?